Hi guys, it's Claire Nocti. Welcome back to my channel and back to my astrological research study on occultism. Today I will be taking you through part 2 of my survey where I took the charts of 125 of the most influential occultists of all time. I graphed all of their placements and found the most common shared placements to determine which factors in a chart can really support growth in this field. In part 1, I explored the power and qualities of the dominating nakshatra that arose in this field, and in part 2 today I'm going to be taking you through 4 sections. The first 2 sections are the second and third most important nakshatras that arose in the survey. The third section is an interesting thing I uncovered while working with those 3 top nakshatras. An interesting place that I noticed those 3 all interact and kind of weave together that has to do with spirituality. And section 4 is then an additional honorable mention nakshatra that I felt like it was important to touch on a little bit. This research led me into a ton of unexpected territory and became a lot more expansive than I originally imagined. So bear with me as I try today to take you through an immersive and experiential journey through what I've uncovered here. It might get a little bit more disorganized than usual, but I'm going to try to make it as clear as possible. My Gesture Plus patrons will be receiving a PDF document with all the graphs in this survey and some more analysis and discussion of, first of all, a really key Rashi that was the top Rashi for I think 4 or 5 planets, as well as a really important placement for Mercury. So if you're interested in that, or if you're interested in just supporting my channel, please check out my Patreon. I really pour my heart and soul into each one of these videos, even though I publish them for free. So I'm beyond appreciative for the support of my patrons, but I'm just going to jump into part 2 right now, and I hope you enjoyed the video. The next key nakshatra that I will be exploring in this series tied for the second highest moon placement amongst occultists, as well as was the top Lagna placement in my survey of 165 astrologers, Hasta Nakshatra. In part 1 of this series, I explored the nakshatra of Shravana. Hasta is another of the 3 nakshatras operating under Moon, the medium, in the Vimshatori system. Those with Moon in one of these nakshatras are placed into Moon's tangible grip and experience. When I combined the top 3 primary placements together in this survey, all 3 Moon-ruled nakshatras were present in the top 5. Moon links these 3 into all being completely entangled within the themes I've been exploring, especially relating to the intuitive and receptive side of occultism, mediumship, automatic writing, channeling, psychic abilities, hypnosis, dream work, and so on. What started as a simple analysis of nakshatras and occultism took my hand and pulled me unexpectedly into a thorough analysis of why Moon is the principal planet of these subjects, which I will explore more later. In review, as the Moon progresses, in Shravana it reaches its height of receptivity, where it is depicted as divine beings incarnate, avatars, chosen ones, possessing natural powers. Their whole conscious identity is essentially the divine that they are opening towards, a characteristic unique and specialized towards Moon's refinement nakshatra. Hasta has an interesting contrast with this, polarized more towards spiritual expression in its feminine natives, as being a kind of womb or mother for the seeds of the divine and communicating them. Being in the center of the terrestrial Virgo, the most material sign, the mind applied to material matters, this is a key nakshatra for the female path due to women being the horizontal axis embodying the presence of Shakti or the Holy Spirit upon earth. That is why it makes sense for the most material sign to possess some of the most spiritually oriented women, as women's role is opposite the male spiritual role and is earthly in nature. The barren soil of this nakshatra relates to purity to such a level, as such an earthly thing, that no physical seed is deeply accepted, no polarity between themselves and the material, but their only true counterpart is the divine and its seeds. While Rohini's purity comes from devoting to one outer male source and being soaked in sunlight, Hasta is a nakshatra which remains in an energetically pure virginal state as its cosmic purpose, and unconsciously or consciously denies outer influence. It connects to and holds within its womb a growing inner sun, partaking of mystical internal sexual experiences and growing divine ideas within it, and then birthing them in a feminine material expression. So because its cosmic interest is in rejecting spiritually uninspiring male influences, its archetype, when tapped into its spiritual nature, is in alignment with Virgo, and the prominence of nuns here that I was just showing and that I previously discussed in my past Hasta video, as the veiled or hidden woman. The masculine and feminine typically interact based on respective seed seer and being seen. Shakti sits upon Shiva's lap. Shiva peers into the mysteries within her that she embodies but does not see, and he expounds upon them and teaches her with his word. The woman embodies mystery. Her body is her teaching. In her form alone, she holds the secrets to life and inspiration, which is why her body adorns ancient temples, is the oldest religious artistic image, and is the primary subject of the arts. It is the physical image most charged with transformative and stirring energy when contemplated. When she displays her form, she is also mercifully revealing nature's secrets, allowing others to face their animal nature and gain control of their kundalini. Hasta, however, as the earth itself, is the challenging force of the feminine to resist perception and remain impenetrably hidden, with only adepts who can access her, astrally communing with her. It is the new moon embodying adversity to outer light. As an embodiment of the feminine enshrouded in mystery and darkness, she is also Mother Nature in its most severe expression, as the impulse to maintain the duality and division associated with House 6 and the material plane. A metaphor for this is the veil of Isis, an allegory in which nature is personified by Isis, and her veil displays the inaccessibility of nature's mysteries and secrets. Written with the original statue of the veiled Isis, "I am all that has been and is and shall be, and no mortal has ever lifted my mantle. The fruit of my womb was the sun." If a man encounters a female adept and can penetrate through her veil of death and earthly mortality, he can go beyond death. So shunning outer male influence makes them consorts for the divine. Hasta, as the core of the most material house and as Mother Nature, is the primary force behind science in the most practical manner, the pinpointing and defining of absolute, tangible physical laws of nature. For this reason, I quote, "Illustrations of Isis with her veil being lifted were popular as allegorical representations of Enlightenment science and philosophy, working to uncover nature's secrets." This is also why I mentioned in my previous video on Hasta the way they tend to enjoy male company, especially through celibate male figures as colleagues or teachers like monks and priests, and also that they feel a natural connection to the Immaculate Conception and the birth of divine children as Virgin Mother archetypes. Interestingly, Isis in myth was the mother of Horus the Younger, a divine or chosen conquering child, who, I quote, "came to represent a promise by the gods to take care of suffering humanity," much like the previously mentioned avatars of Vishnu relating to Shravana. In multiple myths, the world is out of order, and it is up to the child Horus to restore this order through battling with the god Set. Both forms of Horus were associated with the falcon or depicted as falcon-headed, which is what Aquila, the bird constellation, is said to have been likely associated with in Egypt, the falcon of Horus, and Shravana is the head of this bird. In this way, Horus upon the lap and drinking from her breast can be a symbol for the secrets of nature and the divine and chosen child who drinks from her mysteries, relating to the Shravana prophet archetype and the Hasta Virgin Mother archetype. These two nakshatras have an extreme connection that I will be exploring through this video. This is shown in Hasta's overwhelming domination in the highly influential movement of Theosophy and Occultism, an esoteric framework embracing and studying the essential truths underlying all religions, philosophies, and science. Theosophy's doctrine was mainly based on the writings of mystic Helena Blavatsky, a Hasta moon native. Theosophy's core teaches, I quote, "There is an ancient and secretive brotherhood of spiritual adepts known as the Masters. These Masters are alleged by Blavatsky to have cultivated great wisdom and supernatural powers, and Theosophists believe that it was they who initiated the modern Theosophical movement through disseminating their teachings via Blavatsky. She claimed to be conveying her messages through mediumship connected to these Masters or adepts. One of these adepts she claimed to be the Shravana native Franz Mesmer, who I explored in the previous video, as well as two mysterious men, Kuthumi and Moira. She wrote a book titled Isis Unveiled, emphasizing her hope for Theosophical beliefs to penetrate into the deepest spiritual truths underlying all things, and inspiring the allegories known as the parting of or the piercing of the veil in ceremonial magic for entering a higher state of spiritual awareness and gaining access to the mysteries. There were two individuals that Blavatsky considered as her progenitors, the two behind what is called Neo-Theosophy, or the branch that came to be after Blavatsky's passing. These figures were Annie Besant and Charles Leadbeater, both who are Hasta natives. The most famous and influential of the students of Theosophy, though, was Hasta ascendant native Dion Fortune. These women are very similar, both with the unique ability to supposedly channel divine supernatural adept male sources, as Dion Fortune as well claimed that her writings were the channeling of an ascended master adept called the Priest of the Moon, through what she called inspirational mediumship, the belief that masters could influence her subconscious mind. This nakshatra's desire is fittingly, "May the gods place their faith in me." Dion Fortune is one of the main figures to have expounded upon the goddess, female power and spirituality, and goddess-centered religious approaches. Another of the most famous theosophical figures was Alice A. Bailey, who could be Hasta Moon as well, as her available birth time is unverified. Just like the Hasta women around and influencing her, I quote, she described the majority of her work as having been telepathically dictated to her by a master of wisdom, initially referred to only as the Tibetan, or by the initials DK. This can be contemplated in art through the previously mentioned film The Fury, in which the Shravana teenage boy is shown as possessing supernatural abilities, and the government kidnapped him to try to wield these abilities. Meanwhile, his father encounters a teenage girl attending a psychic school who is said to have the most natural psychic capability they've ever seen.
And she is the best subject for psychic research I have ever seen.
Even the most backward tribes, the most primitive cultures on Earth would welcome the birth of a Robin Sansa. And in time, he'd become their magician, their prophet, their great healer. But there is no place for these kids in our culture because they're so superior to what we hold sacred. And what a culture can't assimilate, it destroys.
Through visions, she is able to telepathically connect to this powerful Shravana boy, watch where he is, and go to attempt to rescue him. As these women have a natural ability to connect to any powerful or divine men through their fixation on purity, and articulate and communicate their messages consciously.
Do you know him?
I feel like I do.
They strongly fixate on supernatural or spiritual powers in men in that highly devotional lunar manner, energy flowing towards spiritual authority figures and closing off to other types of men. Similar to the Fury, in Powder, which I talked about in part 1, the Shravana character is outcasted by everyone at school except for a Hasta girl who is attracted to his mystical power and understanding.
Do you think I'm ugly?
Sometimes I think you're the most beautiful face I've ever seen.
The film Twilight captures the story of a mortal woman who encounters and wins the adoration of an immortal supernatural vampire with mystical abilities.
You better hold on tight, Spider Monkey.
And she is played by Hasta Moon native Kristen Stewart. I want to distinguish this inspirational mediumship channeling of male adepts for a moment from what Dion Fortune called automatic mediumship, which is not what she did. In that kind of mediumship, the scryer is completely unconscious of what is going on, disassociated from their body, and is possessed fully temporarily by the divine force animating them. And this tends to be depicted by Punarvasu Nakshatra, whereas Hasta remains in control and articulate. Punarvasu is this type of intense, dramatic, mythical trance mediumship that is more in fantasy or in possession rituals. The oracles, for example, who pronounce the destiny of the Shravana characters tend to have Punarvasu Nakshatra.
Professor Trelawney.
He will return tonight.
Sorry?
Tonight, he who betrayed his friends whose heart rots with murder shall break free.
I'm so sorry, dear boy. Did you say something?
A light from the shadow shall spring. Renewed shall be blade that was broken.
You have the gift of foresight. What did you see?
I looked into your future and I saw death.
And there is an important connection between these nakshatras that I will explore when I am able to give a more complete description of the nature of Punarvasu in the future. So the Theosophical movement drew on and combined streams of understanding from both Eastern thought and Western philosophies, and was the primary influence that brought Eastern traditions into the West, producing that element of what is considered New Age. Interestingly, from the Indian side of things, it was Hasta Moon Swami Vivekananda who, I quote, was the key figure in the introduction introduction of the Indian philosophies of Vedanta and yoga to the Western world, and is credited with raising interfaith awareness and bringing Hinduism to the status of a major world religion during the late 19th century. Vivekananda was one of the main representatives of Neo-Vedanta, a modern interpretation of selected aspects of Hinduism in line with Western esoteric traditions, especially transcendentalism, New Thought, and Theosophy. His reinterpretation was and is very successful, creating a new understanding and appreciation of Hinduism within and outside India. So the reason why Hasta was having such a domination and influence at this time also relates as well to the movement that was an early influence for Blavatsky, spiritualism and spiritism. These movements were the force driving and paving way for the concepts of mediumship and channeling that were so prevalent in the foundations of theosophical thought. This was a movement that described the ideas that spirits of the dead exist and have the ability and inclination to communicate with the living, giving a framework and modes of approach to working with dead entities, as well as spirit guides, and gaining information from them. This was developed by Hasta's son and moon native, the father of spiritualism in France, Allan Kardec, who was also considered the father of psychic research, being the first to codify channeled messages and engage in seances. A primary figure noted as being an influence on spiritualism and its ideas was again Franz Mesmer, a Hasta and Shravana further interaction. Hasta is symbolized by the hand and relates to the manipulation of spiritual forces in a tangible, practical way, relating it strongly to magic and engaging in spiritual acts or contemplation with physical, material results and applications, as well as the mercurial writing and communicating of spiritual messages. Crowley said in the Book of Thoth, for example, that the hand is the magical implement par excellence. Hasta Shakti expands on this, possessing the power to gain whatever one seeks and have it in one's own hands. So while Shravana is ultimately fixated on the idea of angelic, otherworldly heavenly beings, Hasta has a more earthly tendency, both in its beliefs of the origin of what it channels and what it does with what it channels. Even the masters that they channel in their minds are simply the spirits of dead human adepts. They have a stronger fixation on earthly spirits like the dead, elementals, and genies. Their similar magical power compared to Shravana can be seen in the film The Craft. A group of teenage girls engage in witchcraft rituals, but encounter a girl, Sarah, with natural magical abilities and psychic powers who completes their group, and allows them all to access differing levels of psychic and magical power. She has Hasta Moon. One of the other girls in the group, Nancy, catches on to using the magic powerfully, and she has Rohini Moon. But she begins to misuse these gifts, and Sarah must defeat the girls. The iconic film Love Witch was directed by a Shravana native and stars Hasta ascendant Samantha Robinson as a modern witch, casting powerful love spells on man after man to the point that her love victims die from how intensely they fall into love for her. She seeks to find a man who can withstand her enchantment without dying. I've talked before about Hasta and Ashlesha having very similar themes of purity and of rejecting all male energy except strong forces. And with Ashlesha, it is quite unconscious, unwilled, and instinctual, with more of a physical and material assertion required to thaw it. With Hasta, it is willed, conscious, and deliberate, with intention and this magical quality requiring spiritual assertion to overcome it. The little girl who's open to and channeling the ghosts moving through her house in Poltergeist has Hasta ascendant. The old Hollywood film Supernatural, about a woman who was able to channel the dead, starred Hasta native Carol Lombard. I mentioned in part 1 the Stargate experiments when the government was testing remote viewing psychic spies, and the other main psychic spy, Joseph McMoneagle, had Hasta ascendant. The stars of Bewitched and Mary Poppins, two of the first main positive depictions of a witch, are both Hasta natives, and Shakespeare, the author of Macbeth, can have this moon. Hasta as a magical woman is shown in further real-life examples, such as the famous voodoo priestess and herbalist called the Voodoo Queen Marie Laveau with Hasta Moon. She is an endless subject of magical lore. Hasta women's ability to be one of the nakshatras embodying the feminine adept role can be seen in that Aleister Crowley's most famed muse and Scarlet Woman, Layla Waddell, had Hasta Moon and became in her own right a famous and influential magical figure and accomplished writer. He also lived for a time with the Lemic psychic and automatic writer Jane Wolfe, who took the name Soror Estai and could have Hasta Moon. The term for a female adept in India is a Bhairavi, and Bhairavi is the goddess associated with what people think of as necromancy, linking to to the way these women of this nakshatra, which is one of the key ones for the female path, are very involved in mediumship of the dead, seances, and spiritualism. The film Cemetery Man was written and directed by a Hasta Moon Man, as well as starring Hasta ascendant actress Anna Falchi. While she is mourning her dead rich husband, her character meets a gravedigger who shows her dark things that excite her, and then she removes her veil and has sex with him in the cemetery, something which is a motif of the stories of Tantric Bhairavis in India. This action awakens in him a search for meaning in his life beyond the cemetery. Falchi continues to appear to him in different forms throughout the story, encounters with her helping him grapple with different parts of himself, such as his lack of sexual control, his fear of death, as Bhairavi means the terrifier, or she who takes you beyond fear, and eventually this leads him to the realization that he is in a comatose illusion, a metaphor for the awakening from the grand illusion that Bhairavis bring to the spiritual aspirant. This is why, although initially veiled, many Hasta films contain some of the most revealing and explicit feminine nude scenes, a gesture of her waiting for the one who is able to pierce her veil. Hasta is not about having no sexuality, but having an abundant and intoxicating sensuality that is all channeled inwardly and protected. In the show Twin Peaks, Dale Cooper is a type of spiritual adept, a detective who uses dreams, omens, and intuition to uncover mysteries. He is often shown piercing or rending the veil to enter the astral room called the Black Lodge, where he gains information and guidance on his quest. He first encounters this place while investigating the murder of a woman of inspiring mystery who waits behind this veil, Laura Palmer. She is played by Hasta Moon actress Cheryl Lee, who is the face and puzzle of the show. This again emphasizes Hasta women as those astrally in contact with spiritual adepts, and their female adept role as one of the primary nakshatras inspiring the attainment of spiritual growth and knowledge in men. The religion of Islam proposes that those contacted in seances are not spirits of the dead, but are actually a type of jinn or genies who are believed to be responsible for all paranormal activity. Jinn means those who are hidden from the senses, and they were said to be those who inspired and worked with any fortune tellers, as well as the inspiring force for poets, which I have explored previously strongly falls under this nakshatra. Bhairavi in India rules over a class of spirits called Vetala who take possession of a corpse and speak through it, such as how these women claim their writings are inspired from these dead men. I mentioned in my previous Hasta video how this nakshatra relates to the cult of Cybele, the mother goddess, and a name Crowley called his Scarlet Woman was Sister Cybele. There was a mythical race of male beings associated with working for Cybele called dactyls, meaning fingers, magicians who arose when she gave birth and dug her fingers into the earth. Similar to jinn are fairies, and specifically Hasta tends to be related to a famous magical and skillful fairy in our modern mythologies, Tinkerbell. Their physiognomy is often reflective of pixie or fairy-like features. Rose McIver with Hasta Moon portrayed Tinkerbell in Once Upon a Time, and Ludovine Sagnier with Hasta Moon as well portrayed Tinkerbell in Peter Pan, the biggest Peter Pan live-action film. Interestingly, in this film, Peter himself is played by Shravana's son and Moon native Jeremy Sumpter. That's affirming to Shravana's nature as a magical child. Peter never grows up and also reflects the Matangi Chandalini myth in that he is cladded with leaves and lives in the forests of Neverland. Here we see another union of the magical girl and boy, Hasta and Shravana, together. Tinkerbell is sometimes represented by a darting light, something seen as well with the will-o'-the-wisps, ghost candles, sometimes called pixie lights, guiding the main character to his Hasta love interest in Cemetery Man. So Hasta's sixth house, earthly element, is shown in that they are concerned with working with spirits who can allow for physical, tangible results and articulation. Tying to the skepticism and emphasis on psychology that I've previously explored with Hasta in my last Hasta video, the contemporary system called Chaos Magic was created by a Hasta Moon native, Peter Carroll. I quote, "Chaos magic differs from other occult traditions such as Thelema or Wicca in that it rejects the existence of absolute truth and views all occult systems as arbitrary symbol systems that are only effective because of the belief of the practitioner. Chaos magic thus takes an explicitly agnostic position on whether or not magic exists as a supernatural force, with many chaos magicians expressing their acceptance of a psychological model as one possible explanation. To understand the duality of moon-ruled nakshatras being both scientific skeptics and spiritualists, it's helpful to understand Moon's spiritual connection to Earth. In the mystical Kabbalah, Dion Fortune explains that Moon is the planet of occultism in correlation relation to the sphere Yesod, which receives a direct ray from Tiferet and is the great crystallization of spiritual energy from above, which it then channels to the Nefesh, our animal soul or dust body. So Yesod, as our senses, is the connection between our higher self and our ability to receive impressions from the physical plane. It, as the mind, is the astral plane, the first sphere one encounters when rising on the planes and elevating above Malkuth. I quote Israel Regardie, "The astral is the omnipresent and all-permeating fluid or medium of extremely subtle matter, substance in a highly tenuous state upon which the physical world is built. It is the foundation on which all magic can take place because spirit does not directly impact matter but impacts mind, which impacts the matter. Sensation is an affair of mind and matter's interaction, so the substance between them that communicates them can be manipulated magically. The astral can become so powerful as to even produce hallucinations, visions of miracles, and so on the physical plane when entering into the lunar hypnotic state where one peers into Moon's astral energy overlaying and forming the happenings here. Lunar imagination is proto-matter, less solidified and in a state where it can still be manipulated before earthly crystallization. That is why magical operations require the use of correlating smells, colors, etc. to the planet or force that you are working with, because it aligns the senses to open the portals to that specific area through Yesod, the mind. What we adjust on the astral through mind and magic later matriculates in tangible earthly form as Moon, the mother, is the form giver. Adjusting things on the astral is like accessing and manipulating this proto-matter that is still forming in the womb before it manifests. So if you continually did sympathetic magic by applying a sweet substance to someone, slowly, astrally, that sweet substance merges with and influences their own astral shell and then matriculates into their life and form and what is connected to them. Those around them may react more sweetly to them. They themselves could become more pleasing or speak or look sweeter, they would gain more wealth, and so on. So this interplay of astral workings and physical results relates to how Moon and Earth are said to share an etheric shell, as their origins were united as one body, although they are now physically separate and are now the positive and negative pole. But essentially, that is why Moon's waxing and waning cosmic tides and movements have such an effect on psychic abilities and happenings on Earth, and why Moon is said to be the most important astrological planet in general in one's chart. Psychology and hypnosis, which are primarily created by Moon-world individuals, are essentially the sciences of the mind that absorbed spirituality in the West, as spirituality throughout time has been an art of the mind and its symbols, of learning to interpret, concentrate, or transport the mind to different realms and otherworldly experiences, peering into the house of astral images of the collective unconscious to understand yourself and others. This ancient unity between Moon and Earth is thus why Moon-dominant individuals are on both sides of the coin in terms of being the most interested in mysticism as well as the main skeptics, those who are aware of illusion like stage magicians or mentalists, and physical scientists. Both those concerned with earthly matters and those concerned with its lunar counterpart fall under the Moon in an astrological sense. Moon individuals are aware that spiritual phenomena takes place within the mind, but on one side they use that to say that spirituality is not real, while on the other side, in terms of psychology and magic, they say that means it is very real, depending on how you look at it. Chaos magic is a kind of combination of those ideas. So Hasta, being scientifically natured, is also a dominating nakshatra in the fields such as parapsychology and paraphysics, the physical and material study of spiritual phenomenon, the desire to be able to contain spiritual understandings into scientific labeling, in the same way as research of the physical plane. This is why spiritualism specifically was quite concerned with material results and producing paranormal phenomenon, the table moving, lights flickering, beings appearing in human shapes under sheets, the presence of ectoplasm, and so on. In fact, a primary criticism of spiritualism is that it is just too materialistic. They too badly wish that blatantly physical phenomenon breaking the laws of nature would occur from their work. This is where Hasta's deceitful or swindling tendencies come in. Deception is present in all lunar fields, but perhaps reaches its pinnacle in Hasta, where emotions are manipulated with Mercury's cold nature. While the Shravana charlatan archetype is present, Shravana natives like Mesmer and Dee were thought to be genuine in their beliefs even if others thought that they were delusional. Hasta has many genuine spiritual workers as well, but there is also a side to it that is a bit different. The Hasta-dominated spiritualism movement lost popularity over time, in effect, as it was largely discredited and disproven by skeptics skeptics, including Houdini, as I mentioned in part 1, who would attend these seances and find endless examples of total conscious fraud and trickery, doing anything they could to deceive their viewers. In fact, this became so prominent that a book was written called The Psychic Mafia, about how much money was swindled through the fraudulent groups of spiritualists. When Hasta gets its hands on something that it can manipulate, it tends to oftentimes go down the route of deception. Which is interesting too in light of pixie lights being traditionally said to be deceptive and misleading, leading travelers astray. The Mafia reference is also interesting in light of my previous video on Purva Bhadrapada Nakshatra, where I described 2 primary nakshatras involved in the Mafia and criminal activity being Purva Bhadrapada and Hasta, which are the 2 nakshatras described in the Brihat Samhita as criminals. This begins to shed some light on why magic and occultism is largely taboo, largely something practiced by those outside of society. These nakshatras are prominent in crime as well as magic subjects, which until extremely recently, and even very much still to this day, make one ostracized, considered evil or insane, or considered a fraud right off the bat. And that brings me to the next highly spiritual nakshatra that arose in this survey. Purva Bhadrapada is very key to consider in mystical fields, as it tied with Hasta for second for occultist moon placements, as well as tied for the highest moon nakshatra in my survey of 165 astrologers. Just a few months ago, I did a 2-hour immersion into this nakshatra, but there's actually still quite a bit more to say about its shocking influence in the occult world specifically. It is the most important nakshatra for esotericism, philosophically, the true occult nakshatra, and is the reason occultism is so demonized. While the moon-ruled nakshatras deal with intuition, symbols, ideologies, and so on, they can have as much of a tendency to channel this mystical inclination into creating or practicing exoteric religion, as I mentioned previously in part 1 in my original Hasta video. Moon is a dualistic and divided planet, ruled by the number 2 in Vedic numerology, and Hasta religious movements like Theosophy strongly brought forth this dualism and projection of Christian morality onto more ancient occult practices, and then they streamlined it into something more palatable to the Western Christian mind, which then had a global impact. For example, it was the writings of Blavatsky that first popularized the modern idea of black magic versus good magic. In true tantric thought, a duality such as that is incredibly clumsy and full of faults in a philosophical sense. Tantric writings quickly obliterate such a thing, which I won't get into here and now, but will in the future. Purva Bhadrapada, unlike the 2 moon-ruled nakshatras I've explored, has a true inability to conform or be programmed under exoteric religions, and a strong proclivity for only the esoteric. This nakshatra is the pure momentum to obliterate concepts of good and evil, transcend the societal binds created by reason alone, which is why it is the stage of crossing the sphere of Dhat, the abyss, the irrational dust in which all these things are clashed with their opposite, dissected into nothingness, proven to be inherently illusory. It's helpful to remember Purva Bhadrapada's dominance over the femme fatale, fatal woman trope in film noir. Film noir, meaning dark film, was an era in cinema that expressed artfully the timeless contemplations of this nakshatra. I paraphrase Jeffrey Stilwell. Film noir brings its audience to contemplate the dark and lurid fantasies of the population, plunging us into a world untouched by cultural and conventional values, brought into the criminal underworld, defined by moral ambiguity. In these films, one dives under mainstream society into the obscure depth of lawlessness, following the psyches of characters that give into their most twisted and forbidden desires like murder, sex, and so on, imploring audiences to examine their own notions of morality and righteousness.
Who knows what evil lurks in the hearts of men?
So the anti-hero, as well as the femme fatale trope, were born from film noir, and as Shakti personifications of Purva Bhadrapada, it is they who often seductively lead men in these films into the stripping of all enforced morality. They themselves are murderesses, as I explored in the previous video that the goddess relating to their energy is Kali, who has the Shakti of Maran karma or killing magic. I compared their energy to the one-hooved Caribbean folk murderess, La Diablesse, and the Empuse in Greek mythology, rolled over by Hecate, who controls these women. A mythological femme fatale is Medea, played by Purva Bhadrapada actress Nancy Kovac in Jason and the Argonauts, a priestess of Hecate, who is, with her skills in magic, able to help Jason in his search for the Golden Fleece, and eventually weds him and has children with him. Later, when Jason falls for the king's daughter, Creusa, she murders her with poison gifts and kills her own sons. Purva Vajrapada embodies all the unsettling and unpalatable aspects of ancient tantric teachings which have made them so feared and warned about. Before this stage, individuals are weighed down in some way by their human reason, which inhibits their animal power because of their fear that they wouldn't be able to control it, or fear of punishment from the societal or religious system that they conform to. Purva Bhadrapada is in a positive sense when it succeeds, when one is cosmically ready to access that reservoir of animal strength and impulse, violent and sexual, to break out of chains. As you hear, believe you know your divine transcendent will without fear, and are ready to attempt to direct your animal power in conformity to it, to carry out what you truly need to do, even if it involves harsh actions. This is why such a rule-breaking nakshatra is a key stage to high-level spiritual attainments. Victor Trimonde, writing on Tantric Buddhism, describes this well. I quote, "Every type of passion, sexual pleasure, fits of rage, hate, and loathing, which is normally considered taboo by Buddhist ethical standards, is activated and nurtured in Vajrayana, the Tantric stage, with the goal of then transforming it into its opposite." The Buddhist monks, who are usually subject to a strict, puritanical-seeming set of rules, cultivate such breaches of taboo without restriction once they have decided to follow the Tantric diamond path. Excesses and extravagances now count as part of their chosen lifestyle. Such acts are not simply permitted, but are prescribed outright, because according to Tantric doctrine, evil can only be driven out by evil, a thorn is removed from the foot by another thorn, and poison is the only cure for poison. For this reason, the Kalachakra Tantra exhorts its pupils to commit the following: to kill, to lie, to steal, to break the marriage vows, to drink alcohol, to have sexual relations with lower-class girls. A tantric is freed from the chains of the wheel of life by precisely that which imprisons a normal person. As a tantric saying puts it, what binds the fool liberates the wise. According to this, every ritual is designed to catapult the initiate into a state beyond good and evil. He goes on to say that in this stage, one can render holy even the most seemingly evil deeds, as they lack inherent existence. Tied to the dangerous territory of Purva Bhadrapada, as I've previously described, its use of hellish imagery, by the same evil acts that bring people into hell, the one who uses the right means gains salvation, there is no doubt. In the Guhya Samaja Tantra, it is said a woman who has abandoned herself to a lust for life, who takes delight in human blood, is to be revered by the yogi. The practice of cursing is taught to every tantric adept. These types of intense, ancient spiritual metaphors present this moral relativity that this tantric nakshatra dwells upon, that sets it apart so far from society. All religion is a type of programming, which I'll explore in the next section, but it's Purva Bhadrapada which automatically struggles out of programming, and therefore can interact with the core of different worldviews without projection, for better or for worse. They personify as a life path this disturbing tantric stage of intense shedding of restrictions. For this reason, it is these natives that can be traced back to philosophically influencing almost all occult movements. One of the primary influences on the development of early modern occultism was Johann Trithemius, the teacher to early occult thinkers Paracelsus and Agrippa, who had Purva Bhadrapada moon. His most famous work was called Steganographia, a book all about magic and the use of and communication with spirits that was studied later by John Dee. I explored in my previous video about Purva Bhadrapada's overwhelming connection to the story of Faust in both origin and modern art examples, about a man who makes a devilish pact through ceremonial magic to break out of human limitation in power and knowledge, and this legend was said to be based on a real man, a magician and astrologer who was quite mysterious. However, one of the most notable mentions of him or his students is through Trithemius, who wrote about encountering a man boasting blasphemously of his powers, even claiming that he could easily reproduce all the miracles of Christ. In slight review, the individual considered the most influential occultist of the 19th century was Purva Bhadrapada moon native Eliphas Levi. It is said that it is due to him and the occultists inspired by him that the 20th century revival of magic took place. Levi was a primary figure in Hermetic Kabbalah, as well as the esoteric use of tarot, and was the first to popularize using the term occultism in general, and much more. He was a huge influence on the Golden Dawn and Purva Bhadrapada moon native Aleister Crowley, perhaps the most influential occultist of all time. Levi also strongly influenced Blavatsky and Theosophy. Jupiter is the philosopher and teacher, and these individuals organize and structure magical understandings into large philosophical frameworks. Jupiter desires to make things accessible to all people, organizing religion and systematizing things in order for them to become accessible to all. They want to create defined logical systems that others can connect with and use. Ceremonial magic, of which these individuals dominate, is all of the techniques to influence your inner and outer world. A applying those previously mentioned things like tools, rituals, words, clothing, perfumes, etc. that are able to influence the unconscious moon element and submit illusion under the active and directing will, ideally. Crowley defined magic as the science and art of causing change to occur in conformity with the will, and expressed that every act of intention is a magical act. While the lunar nakshatras especially excel in receptivity to impression, Purva Bhadrapada relates to finding one's true will in regards to how to direct energy, and with what framework and to what end to direct all magical workings. This is why they also tend to be those directing these receptive moon-ruled individuals, as I explore more shortly. Eliphas Levi incorporated tarot cards into his magical system, and as a result the tarot first became an important part of the paraphernalia of Western magicians. A French occultist by the esoteric pseudonym of Papus then studied Eliphas Levi and his system of the Kabbalah and tarot in depth, expanding upon it and popularizing occultism more. He especially wrote and philosophized upon the mechanics and use of tarot and its symbolism. Papus also had Purva Bhadrapada moon, and he created an early deck called the Tarot of the Bohemians. Fascinatingly, following this, the two most popular tarot decks used for divinatory purposes and under an esoteric framework are the Rider-Waite deck and the Thoth deck, inspired primarily by Levi along with in subtle ways by Papus's further work on the subject. The Rider-Waite deck is the most popular in the world, created by mystic Arthur Edward Waite, who also has moon in Purva Bhadrapada. Following this, Purva Bhadrapada moon native Aleister Crowley, who founded Thelema, wanted to create a deck as well and was Waite's enemy. Crowley's followed the same systematic principles with some differences from the Rider-Waite deck and earlier versions, and created the next most popular esoteric tarot deck, the Thoth deck, and wrote the Book of Thoth as expounding on the meaning of each card. As I mentioned, Crowley became perhaps the most influential occultist and ceremonial magician, and interestingly was even called by the philosopher John Moore to be a living embodiment of Oswald Spengler's Faustian man. Around the same general time, mystic Paul Foster Case with Purva Bhadrapada moon, another enemy of Crowley's, began a lifelong study of tarot, something he wrote many books about. He founded the occult movement of Builders of the Adityium and created a tarot deck through this system, which he called a correction of the Rider-Waite deck. The world of occult systems of divination, tarot, and magic at this iconic and influential time was essentially just a famed handful of Purva Bhadrapada natives head-to-head, learning from one another, egos clashing, arguing, stealing from one another while also criticizing one another, which speaks in its own way to the chaotic and lawless nature of that sign and the grandiose and big personalities associated with it. Thelema went on to influence Wicca, Satanism, chaos magic, and basically all of modern occultism. Even Hastamoon Swami Vivekananda was a student of Purva Bhadrapada moon native Ramakrishna. Thelema is a modern Western occult system similar to ancient tantric systems in, as I explained, it's free from any defined outer moral bounds or dualisms, and instead implores one to tap into their divine true will. Thelema is absolutely saturated in Purva Bhadrapada natives to the same extent that Theosophy is saturated in Hasta Nakshatra. A huge and astonishing majority of the people Crowley influenced possess this nakshatra. For example, while Crowley created Thelema, Purva Bhadrapada ascendant native Wilfred Talbot Smith was the main one to propagate it through the USA. Purva Bhadrapada native Eugen Grosch founded Fraternitas Saturni, the first Thelemic lodge independent of Crowley, who claimed to accept Crowley's channeled Book of the Law but would not accept Crowley himself. His students also included Scientology creator Purva Bhadrapada's son native L. Ron Hubbard. There was another famed student of his, Charles Stanfield Jones, who Crowley claimed would be the first to cross the abyss after him and who he took as his magical son. Jones also had Purva Bhadrapada moon. This came to be because Crowley realized that 9 months before Jones took the Oath of the Abyss, Crowley had been involved in a set of sex magical operations with Soror Hilarion, the model and poet Jeanne Robert Foster. As a poet and Scarlet Woman, it makes sense that she as well had Hasta moon like his Scarlet Woman Layla Waddell. While Waddell is considered Crowley's most inspiring muse overall, during his later magical relationship with Foster, he described her as his ideal incarnate. So Crowley noted the 9-month interval and concluded that Jones's birth as a babe of the abyss qualified him as the magical child of Crowley and Soror Hilarion. Later, they had a huge falling out when Jones went on to try to make his own different reorganization of the tarot, as well as joined Paul Foster Case's BOTA against Crowley's approval, and Crowley later expelled him, claiming his reorganization of the Kabbalistic attributions was simply full of egoic delusion, that it was unsymmetrical and atrocious, and that anything good from his work he'd simply stolen and copied from Crowley. Shravana native Gerald Gardner, the father of Wicca, leaned upon Crowley's work heavily in the early years. Crowley had worked with Gardner to create Wicca, explaining that he wanted to bring back older folk religion and allow Wicca to be like Thelema, but for those who were less philosophically minded and cerebral and more simple, essentially a way to allow Jupiterian Thelemic teachings to be more easily consumed by the masses, which are lunar in quality. And as you've seen, Moonworld Nakshatras did resonate strongly with the Wiccan teachings and use these symbols a lot in their art.
Well, I hope you like the apartment. She had me take all of the colours from the Thoth Tarot deck, and she and her students did a bunch of occult paintings for me to hang. She's into all that Wicca stuff.
Oh, Trish, I love it. It's just beautiful. It's exactly my taste. Hi, are you Wendy?
Yes. What can I do for you?
I'm Elaine. We spoke on the phone.
Louis.
In that way, Gardner was a type of reflective lunar prophet figure to communicate the Thelemic ideas in a more easily digestible way, as I've explored in the Shravana section. So it's interesting to consider how the main people shown in films doing tarot are moon individuals, while they use the decks created by Purva Bhadrapada people, further solidifying the understanding that Purva Bhadrapada provides the spiritual systems and frameworks with which moon individuals can direct and focus their strong intuition.
The tarot deck is a serious matter. The cards predict the truth, the supernatural truth, and to present your destiny.
Interestingly, the mother of Wicca, Doreen Valiente, who outlined Wicca with Gardner, had Purva Bhadrapada moon. Purva Bhadrapada moon native Maxine Sanders was a key figure in the development of modern witchcraft, called the Queen of the Witches in England. Purva Bhadrapada moon native Sybil Leek was dubbed Britain's most famous witch and wrote endlessly on esotericism. Purva Bhadrapada celebrities like Sybil Shepherd and Asia Argento are known to have occult interests.
Nick McLean, a great crew. Oh, thank you all so much. And particular thanks to the great goddess in all her guises. May she bring us peace, joy, and righteous anger. Blessed be.
So I showed this theme in my video on this nakshatra of these natives being Faustian in that they covet and respect great power of all kinds beyond any other nakshatra, desiring to gain divine levels of knowledge and ability relating to the crossing of the abyss into the state of the adept that occurs at this nakshatra stage. Because Purva Bhadrapada individuals are the archetypal ceremonial magicians, they are this more active and philosophical side of spirituality trying to command the astral light with will, and their interaction with receptive lunar nakshatras is often that they seek to direct them in magical working. The lunar nakshatras being personifications and messengers into the astral light that they are manipulating. The film The Fury that I've explored earlier interplays all three of these nakshatras. It was directed by Purva Bhadrapada native Brian De Palma and also stars Purva Bhadrapada moon native John Cassavetes, who I've explored previously as the actor bargaining with witches in Rosemary's Baby for his own fame. In The Fury, he is the government agent orchestrating trying to capture and control these magic and psychic individuals for the government's power, trying to become their handler.
Tell me about Gillian Belliver. My people always know what's going on here. Will the girl be another Robin Sansa?
At the end of the film, the dying Shravana boy channels all of his powers into the Hasta girl.
Is it just what we need right now? I'll be a good father to you, Gillian.
And then she uses them to kill the Purva Bhadrapada man trying to use them. This ending scene calls to mind the later film Scanners about a very similar subject, directed by Purva Bhadrapada's son native David Cronenberg. The Purva Bhadrapada focus here is again shown in the way this film is also about the government trying to capture and use the skills of special telekinetic and psychic individuals called scanners. Cronenberg also directed the previously mentioned film Dead Zone, and De Palma also directed the film about a girl with these types of powers, Carrie. You can see here how Purva Bhadrapada is frequently involved in films about these powers and their control, study, and use, but not not necessarily these natives being cast as those with the power themselves. This reflects in real life in that I mentioned in part 1 the Stargate project about when the government was doing remote viewing experiments and working to create psychic spies, the most notable being Shravana native Pat Price, and another primary one, a Hasta native Joseph McMoneagle. The head physicist assigned to this project for directing, testing, and training these individuals was Russell Targ, a Purva Bhadrapada moon native. I described in the video on this nakshatra the relation of this nakshatra and Hasta to the mob and crime, and how occultism again is taboo and outside of society as well. I described Hasta as the thief engaging in these acts of crime while also immersing in society, but Purva Bhadrapada as the thief in law, individuals who establish laws, philosophies, and frameworks in areas that are taboo or wild, such as crime or occultism. So it's fascinating the way that these 3 nakshatras as moon placement have basically birthed all of the most influential movements in the occult world. All of these frameworks play off of one another, and in that way these 3 nakshatras have interacted abundantly throughout history. Of course, each nakshatra has certain spiritual themes that lead to a thread in different mystical fields, such as my previous explorations of connections like Magha with transcendental meditation and yoga, the other Ugra nakshatras like Bharani and the Venus nakshatras with tantric philosophy, and many other mystics in India, and there are many more I have planned to explore in individual nakshatra videos. So of course, don't think that this is the end of nakshatras with mystical inclinations. I made a note in part 1 that I'd be mentioning Mula due to their overall presence, along with the nakshatra that I'll be talking a little bit about in section 4, in terms of things like witches in films overall. The witch trope is pretty vast, and Mula appeared frequently on the peripherals of this research in terms of being cast as witches in films, and as tending even to be the side characters in these moon-dominated films. In both American Horror Story Coven and The Craft, the moon individuals who are the main characters in terms of magic are accompanied by Mula moon women. There's also one other nakshatra involving very ancient witchcraft that I'll explore in that nakshatra video. So there's one more thing I want to touch on that melds these 3 key nakshatras together, relating to what the true essence of spirituality is. Just as hypnosis and psychology relate to entering or changing the mind and therefore the experience and behavior, Moon's dominance here shows the way that spirituality and religion is also a type of willing or unwilling brainwashing or mind programming. A hypnosis that places people into different mini-worlds of belief. Moon-ruled nakshatras are essentially the force that can bring hordes of people together as Moon rules the masses, and so Moon is behind both exoteric religions led by prophets as well as cults in many ways, in that it gathers people together under ideas. Ketu's involvement in cults is then more related to the deadly reputation that cults have gained due to Ketu's more dangerous and inhaling nature, whereas Moon just does the coagulation of the individual. So oftentimes it transitions from being a cult with a cult leader to becoming a commune, then a major movement, then perhaps eventually being so widely accepted it's called a religion and the cult leader is then called a prophet. Moon-ruled individuals can gather masses under ideas because they are able to speak simply to the common person, understanding them in their struggles. Moon people tend to somehow make individuals each feel unique or special for liking them, each feeling a type of individuality or ego inflation that comes in being a follower of someone else. This can be seen in another way through Hasta Moon Jordan Peterson. Moon-ruled nakshatras have a powerful and strange, cohesive communal effect where people excitedly gather and unite under their ideas. So the act of kidnapping someone from a cult to try to free their mind is then called deprogramming. Programming has so much to do with Moon that archetypal depictions of either the programmer or the programmed are both Moon over and over. On the Wikipedia page for deprogramming, 4 films are listed, all 4 which star an individual with a moon-ruled moon as the one who has been brainwashed or programmed. In Ticket to Heaven, a young man with Shravana Moon and Rohini Sun joins a cult.
Why don't you come along?
Yeah, David, why not, David? It'll be fun. Come
Just
on.
for the
You'll
weekend?
love it. You'll come on. Why not? Come on.
Look, I'm not coming home right away. It's the greatest thing that's ever happened to me. I can't describe it, really. You have to experience it to know what I mean.
Split Image was directed by a Shravana Ascendant native, starring a Rohini Moon man as the one who was programmed into the cult.
I've seen love in Neil, and I've seen it in all of you. I was dead before I came to this place. I was literally dead.
Danny is dead. Danny is dead. I am Joshua, a warrior in your cause.
I am Joshua, a warrior in your cause.
In Faults, a Shravana Moon woman joins a cult, and the man hired to kidnap and deprogram her has Shravana Moon as well. Due to the double Shravana, this film interestingly flips this and makes it so that she ends up being the cult leader who in turn programs him while he's trying to deprogram her, and he becomes a follower of her.
Listen to my words. Feel them.
Tell me what you lost. I want to hear it.
My show, money, my house, my what?
No! Those are things.
Do you trust me?
Unquestionably.
I'll talk about the other film shortly, but the magical stage relating to Yesod, the moon, is that called Zelator. To progress from the stage of neophyte to that of Zelator, it is said that one must be a master of the astral plane, but this is a stage as well accompanied by the literal zeal through which this stage gets its name. In all of these films, there's a scene where the newly indoctrinated cult member expresses that they feel stronger than ever, that they now have some belief, so they act with passion and purpose and conviction. And so this stage also includes the ego inflation that happens when one thinks they've found all the answers or their savior. They're zealots or lunatics thinking they're superior to others for their beliefs, leaving their families behind in these movies and things like that.
I told you to leave me alone. Neil was right. You're not interested in my spiritual welfare. The both of you are dead. And you just want me to die with you.
Honey, please, just come home with us right now, please.
This is my family.
So that element at this stage is actually a kind of frenzy normal to the breakthroughs that occur here if one can eventually realize how to use it correctly, this raising of the astral emotional force that moon individuals inspire. Moon people as cult leaders or charismatic people can stir passion, but when it is without truth or the objective and reasonable core, when there is no solar, rational, directed element, it leads to insanity. The film The Other Lamb depicts a Shravana moon cult leader with many wives and daughters.
My wives, you all came to me broken, searching. I took every one of you in.
And stars a young Hasta Moon woman who is being shaken out of his programming through dreams. This shows the strong Shravana man Hasta woman connection I explored previously, and that he views her as the special one he wants to take as his wife and is willing to kill all of his older wives to have. Mind programming can be seen as highly linked to Moon further in The Manchurian Candidate, which was directed by a Shravana Moon native. Denzel Washington and Liev Schreiber both play soldiers who were hypnotized and implanted with false memories, given post-hypnotic trigger words to be controlled and used for political purposes. Denzel Washington has Shravana Moon and Hasta Ascendant, and Liev Schreiber has Hasta Sun. Denzel first begins to remember he was programmed through another programmed soldier coming to him and telling him of the disturbing dreams he's been having, who also had Rohini Moon.
Do you have dreams, sir?
Everybody has dreams.
No, not these.
In Clockwork Orange, a criminal Hasta Moon man is programmed by a Rohini native to feel violently ill from the thoughts of sex or violence. In Donnie Darko, a Rohini man gains vision of the future and is hypnotized in the film by a woman with Shravana Sun and Hasta Moon. In Stir of Echoes, there is a very accurate and interesting hypnotism scene with a Rohini woman.
Now I want you to pretend you're in a theater, a movie theater. You're the only one there.
The Betty and Barney Hill UFO sightings were unlocked through Rohini Moon Barney being hypnotized. In Midsommar, a Rohini Moon girl is brought to a commune by a Hasta Moon man. It's an interesting contrast if you've seen my Rohini and Sun-dominant men videos between the Sun archetype of her boyfriend who won't and can't understand her emotions and wants to be with his friends.
Do you not love me anymore?
Are you actually gonna leave? You're gonna leave me like this?
And the Hasta man who seems more interested in her emotions and understanding of them.
Do you feel held by him? Does he feel like home to you?
This is my home.
Yet, in accordance with Hasta's, Mercury's articulation mixed with the emotional moon is also tricking her and wants her to be indoctrinated into the cult secretly. In Get Out, a Rohini moon man is kidnapped by a mad scientist doctor who is able to transfer consciousness from one body to another through brain surgery. He is hypnotized and then programmed with trigger words to fall unconscious before the time of this surgery. The mad scientist programmer has Shravana Moon. It's also interesting in light of Purva Bhajapada as the femme fatale archetype that the brain surgeon's daughter, who is the one who seduces the men into falling into this deathly trap, has Purva Bhajapada Moon. In The Devil Rides Out, a Shravana Moon cult leader is a master of hypnosis, controlling his disciples with it.
I do not propose to discuss with you the rights and wrongs of practicing the magic art. In magic, there is neither good nor evil. It is merely a science. The science of causing change to occur by means of one's will. The power of the will is something people do not understand, being merely the power of mind over matter, or in the greater number of cases, the power of mind over mind, as your mind now is succumbing to mine.
In Bell, Book, and Candle, Shravana ascendant native Kim Novak enchants or hypnotizes her neighbor into loving her.
This sort of clouding style. Did a portrait last year. And
You're the only one there. It's one of those great old movie palaces.
This scene helps one understand the suggestible nature of the mind. Being ruled by Moon, it is so receptive that any thought suggested to it immediately appears and begins to bring one deeper into the astral state. Immediately when she suggests the walls in the theater of his vision would be black, they become black. The mind fills in details on its own, but the hypnotist directs it through her suggestions. Just as his mind manipulates it in the visions, this is exactly how the occultist manipulates the astral, which is proto-matter and fluid, and so much less dense than the fixed physical plane. With imagination as proto-matter before crystallization, it's also interesting about the shared space between science and this lunacy and genius. In Islam, they say genies are behind innovations like rockets or electricity, and moon people are the main ones who tend to pick up and channel these innovative ideas. As Earth and Moon, they are the creative counterpart to Sun's detached battery-like nature. They are the creative archetype of the mad scientist or quack, experimenting with ideas that haven't been accepted or fully solidified or ground into Malkut. Like Rohini as the mad creators of sentient beings, and Shravana too sharing elements of this with brain experimentation like the alien and government abduction shown in the last video, and Hasta and Shravana as parapsychologists and psychologists, etc. So with Moon and its rulership of the number 2, they're the hypnotizers and the hypnotized, the grounded scientist and skeptic, but also the charlatan, the quack, and medium that the scientist disproves.
Astrologers, spiritualists, table rappers, the entire lunatic fringe. They've been exposed for the charlatans they are over and over again.
I don't know. A gypsy once told me that I was going to get an unexpected gift.
The cards predict the truth, the supernatural truth. Always.
Anybody who believes that will believe anything.
There are the magician and the debunker, the programmer and the programmed, the concealer of occult techniques, saying things are only physical matter, and the revealer of them, sharing the power of the mind and its influence on matter. They're the veiled woman and also the sexual adept. Now, it is important to consider the flip side of this, which is total deprogramming, freeing the mind from any form of programming whatsoever, and that falls under the Bhadrapada Nakshatras. Purva Bhadrapada is the loosening and struggling to free any enslavement of the mind and obtain true free will, annihilating restraints, liberating the soul, and Uttara Bhadrapada is the stage where one is unable to be controlled by others. Faults and the movie They Live about deprogramming were both by Uttara Bhadrapada directors. James Woods plays the deprogrammer in Split Image and has Uttara Bhadrapada Moon.
Penetration of the infinite.
Danny, are you in there, Danny? Danny!
What is God?
Think about sense objects you become attached to sense objects become attached to become
He's in very deep. You are lying for Neil Kirklander.
Huh? And Kirklander told you to hate. Hate your parents. Hate your brother. Hate your enemies. Hate everything. But love St. Neil. Could you please tell me where in this book it tells you to hate?
The fourth film in the list of deprogramming films I mentioned, Holy Smokes, combines all of this and also shows a lot about the male and female paths. It's going to get a bit intense here, where those who have watched all of my videos from about the past year are going to be able to understand the subtleties a lot more than those who haven't, but I'll try to make it clear for anyone. Holy Smokes was directed by an Uttara Bhadrapada native and stars triple Hasta native Kate Winslet, who travels to India and falls into devotion to a guru named Baba there. Interestingly, the actor who played Baba has Rohini and Purva Ashada, just like Sadhguru and Osho do. This follows this nun-like Hasta archetype of saying she doesn't want a man, but just to be spiritually married to this guru who spiritually marries many of his followers. Her sudden change of mind and behavior upsets and worries her family in Australia, who trick her into coming back, and they then hire a deprogrammer to kidnap her and free her mind, Porva Bajapata moon native Harvey Keitel. Together, they go to a house in the middle of the desert where she is trapped, and he embarks in loosening the chains her mind has been enslaved in.
It will seek the truth, and the truth will set you free. John, 8:32.
It's already heard the truth.
The truth about your saintum, Baba and Mrs. Baba.
Everything's a joke.
You're right. It's not a joke. We're talking about your soul here. Have you thought about the damage that could be done to your soul, to your very center, if you hand it over to someone else? To the wrong someone else? I feel within me that spark, that atom emanation of the divine spirit. Giuseppe Verdi. The soul is the match. The spark. What are you doing with your soul? What is Chidatma Baba teaching you?
Way beyond something you can read in a book and quote. It is. That's his teaching.
And that's what he said. His words. It is.
His words.
He alone attains unto it who exclaims, it is. It is. Thus may be perceived and apprehended in its essence. The Upanishads.
He mentions the suggestible and programmable nature of the mind here, too.
Oh, you made up your mind?
Yes, that's right.
Did you make your mind hard and solid like a brick? If I were to say to you, don't think of pink butterflies, you don't, right? Or do you?
I'm not thinking of pink butterflies.
You just mentioned them.
I get strength like you can't imagine from my choice.
Well, that's what we're really here to examine. The meaning of the word choice and whether you had one or not.
It's also interesting in light of these nakshatras' connections to the barren wilds of the desert that I've explored in the previous videos on these nakshatras, as Hasta as the barren land itself of the genies, and Porva Bajapata as the spiritual aspirant willing to enter the metaphorical desert, individuating from any societal standards, teacher, programming, or protection whatsoever. One crucial night when his deprogramming has become successful and her mind is freeing, she burns the covering veiling garments that she'd become very attached to and stands in the desert completely naked. However, at this point, the story shifts in a way. She pees standing there in front of him, a suggestion or symbol of how truly wild and freed the mindset is, what she has entered, and then she pursues him sexually, which shows the female and male paths described in ancient writings, in that a man must be able to free a woman from previous influences, releasing her bound nature, piercing or parting the veil, and then he must show he can control and direct her in himself, with her as this wild and dynamic Shakti energy. He has freed her and essentially brings her to the Bhairavi churned state of the female adept, where she now begins to offer him true freedom and transformation through their union.
So what do you believe in then?
Why do you want to know that?
Because I'm just curious to know what you worked out.
So you can follow me? Sorry, honey, that's not my ticket.
Here we can see a fictional example of the Hasta Bhairavi and Porva Bajapata male aspirant, just as reflected in Ramakrishna's experiences with the mysterious Bhairavi Brahmani and Crowley's sexual magic workings with two Hasta women. This reflects the way that Durga in myth shows her yoni to defeat the demons within a man. The yoni being the truly catabolic force that can reduce something into purity, where male energy is always too anabolic to do so, and at its anabolic peak in Porva Bajapata. However, in keeping with the dangerous and cautionary Porva Bajapata themes that I explored in that video, Keitel's character is unable to control himself in the total freedom that he allows for himself in the film and spreads to her to unbind her control, instead leading to his total insanity. He can't direct her energy when she's free, just as he cannot control himself when he is, and this is symbolized by her adorning him in a dress and lipstick, something else I mentioned in the Porva Bajapata video, and him becoming obsessed with her and chasing her, claiming they can go worship Baba together if only he can be with her. Again, this intense falling under feminine enchantment reflects the Hasta starring film Love Witch. He views her literally as a goddess. He sees her as Durga and holds a picture of Durga in the film, because he freed her, but then she overpowered him spiritually in her churned state. The spiritual view of the yoni, like the Durga myth and the catabolic fire that Porva Bajapata enters, destroys the whole person if they themselves are impure. If they have a pure core, it liberates him from his demons and ego. So female adepts either enslave or liberate men through their destruction destruction of the ego. This is beautifully within the symbol stream of the Arthurian tale of Parzival, retold and popularized by Richard Wagner in his opera Parsifal, which has a translation as literally meaning pierce the veil. Wagner has Ketu in Shravana. The tale is that of an evil magician named Klingzor, similar to a dark version of the magician Black Brother archetype shown in Shravana and the cult leader types associated with this nakshatra. Like a cult leader, he collects a group of women called the Flower Maidens, who relate to the conscious and unconscious purity nakshatras of Hasta and Ashlesha, which tend to embody darker or more unpalatable aspects of female power. And Klingzor castrates himself so that he cannot fall under their seduction. He then sends them to seduce different knights, inflicting the wound of the lance, and that then makes that man fall therefore under Klingzor's dark power. This is shown in the other films in the way that women are often the first and most abundant to surround a cult leader, and then men begin to join through a kind of unconscious seduction to be in the group of women recruiters in the cult.
Why don't you come along?
Yeah, David, why don't you? It'll be fun.
In Holy Smokes, Ticket to Heaven, Split Image, and Faults, a man is indoctrinated into a cult through a female follower.
Great, whereabouts are we? Oh, you're very good. When the saints go marching in. Oh, when the saints go marching in. We are moving on. Isn't this great?
And everywhere come learn it on.
I don't know. Have you ever had the feeling of being connected to someone in a way that goes beyond understanding?
However, the knight Parsifal is kissed by a flower maiden Kundry, and instead of negatively falling under her power because he is able to handle the female energy, he is instead enlightened from it and able to overcome Klingzor and free Kundry as well, a battle for who is the directing force of her Shakti, who can redeem the woman from the control of the Black Brother. So Holy Smokes is a fascinating modern depiction of a knight destroyed by Klingzor and a flower maiden that he almost frees. When he cries that he now wants to go worship Baba with her, he gets lost in the freedom he churned, instead of having freed her and become the sun that she could reflect fully and with satisfaction. Pushya Nakshatra is one that I finally want to consider, and I will be tying it into its strong connection with Purva Bhadrapada while I do. Those are two nakshatras that it's important to contrast and compare to understand each one better. Pushya tied for top lagna with occultists with Anuradha Nakshatra. However, I'll be focusing on Pushya because when I combined all three primary placements, Pushya outnumbered Anuradha by quite a lot and was overall very present. Pushya is considered the most auspicious nakshatra for all things except marriage, and in that way I first want to note that Pushya tends to come up frequently in a lot of surveys that I haven't released yet. It provides auspicious abundance, padding, merit, and fortune to succeed in different fields and become quite well known, such as how this was the top lagna for wealth in my survey as well. Pushya is prominent as a primary placement in a wide range of occult figures that allows their potential to be tapped into more positively and in a more spiritual way. As an ascendant especially, it's an auspicious vehicle for spiritual tendencies that helps to bring out the highest potential in a person. Both top arising lagnas in this survey are Saturn ruled in Deva temperament and relate to the blossoming of potential, such as both having as one of their symbols the flower or lotus. Pushya's traditional wish is, may I possess the splendor of spiritual knowledge, and it is highly associated with the guru in being ruled by Brihaspati, the guru amongst the deities, and being the exaltation point of Jupiter. Its Shakti is the power to create spiritual energy, the connection between the worshipper and the sacrificial offering. In the Brihad Samhita, it is described as delighting in making sacrificial offerings, a description exclusive to Pushya and its Yoni sheep consort Kritika. Which I mentioned previously is the purifying Agni force, which consumes and delivers the offering. Pushya is a type of sacrificial priest itself, offering the ghee into the fire. Offerings produce wealth and knowledge, which fall under Jupiter. This is why Pushya is Jupiter's balanced exaltation, but not Jupiter ruled itself. There is major mercy here in that one is placed under their own own Saturnian control. Pushya is auspicious because it rules results obtained through austerity and is said in the Brihat Samhita to be a sadhu. The ghee, however, which is offered into the fire, relates to my previous video on Purva Bhadrapada, how I showed that Purva Bhadrapada, as the height of Jupiter, is the accumulation of energy which must be sacrificed and burned as personifications of ghee to be purified, and thus why Purva Bhadrapada is the powerful and intense experience of the individual themselves as they are burned after they have progressed to their testing point. Saturn imposes limits, rules, and laws on itself, and in that way places its ego in submission constantly to these fires. Pushya is the birth of conscious religious practice, which revolves around learning to limit oneself and control the ego. Pushya is initial sacrifice and austerity leading to eventual gains, while Purva Bhadrapada is initial accumulated gains leading to eventual need for sacrifice. They are inverses of one another. Pushya will do the most extreme outer actions reflecting their philosophies in terms of self-reduction and austerity, even without complex philosophies. Purva Bhadrapada will do the most extreme outer actions reflecting their more complex philosophies in terms of no limits, freedom, and no restriction on themselves. Contrasting the exclusive notes for Kritika and Pushya performing sacrificial rites, there's an exclusive note for Purva Bhadrapada that they will neglect religious rites. While Purva Bhadrapada risks destruction in being so indulgent, Pushya can endanger itself from being so astringent. Pushya helps a person take the traits of their other nakshatras to the most extremist state. These two nakshatras are both essential. They are the beginning and end of conscious spiritual practice. Engaging in sacrificial rites is essentially just paying your dues. Pushya as Brihaspati is essentially initiation or first cosmic contact to the religious tools of building a soul, such as rituals and access to a guru, which follows with Ashlesha, where one first begins manipulating the Kundalini and having some results from spiritual practice. That is why Pushya is auspicious for almost all people, because the vast majority of people are in a stage of not being self-realized and of being given mercy and appreciating being given mercy and guidance for their growth. Purva Bhadrapada energies as the embodiment of Christ defilement and all that religions call evil is for the masses the horrifying notion of leaving behind mercy. In this way, in Purva Bhadrapada there is innate rebellion towards one's teachers as one feels the momentum to individuate, which can be a dangerous and confusing stage. When the outer identity wishes to individuate before the true core is able to, they may cling to what they have taken while also trying to form an identity separate from it. That's why there is a theme with these natives of taking out debts and then resisting to pay them, or taking from a teacher and then harming or slandering the teacher, something that contributed to the world of Thelema being so chaotic. Crowley himself joined the Golden Dawn, started by Barani native MacGregor Mathers. Venus energies prefer elitism and have a more secretive nature, but Crowley took the secrets he'd learned from the Golden Dawn and published them openly, as well as cursed Mathers with the grimoire they'd translated together. As I explained earlier, Crowley's own Purva Bhadrapada students, Frater Akkad and Gregor Gregorius, both took Crowley's teachings and then slandered him and changed them. Crowley also tended to deny the influence of Purva Bhadrapada Pappas on him, while those who study both of their work claim that is untrue. A metaphor for this resistance to pay spiritual debts to those who nourished or gave to you is how in Robert De Niro's first major role in Scorsese's Mean Streets, it was about him causing violence and chaos on the streets simply from resisting completely to pay debts he'd taken.
You know, I borrowed money all over this neighborhood, left and right, from everybody, and I never paid them back, so I can't borrow no money from nobody no more, right? So who does that leave me to borrow money from but you? I borrow money from you because you're the only jerk-off around here that I can borrow money from without paying back.
A strong reflection of this, the Purva Bhadrapada Moon comedian Sam Hyde makes videos on the way he takes tens of thousands of dollars in loans with no intent on paying them at all.
Oh, I just remembered, I owe a bunch of people a lot of money. Let me sprint to go pay that. Barclays, I owe you over $2,000. American Express, I owe you over $2,000. Capital One, I think I owe you over $2,000. Aprilia, I owe you a lot of money. Verizon, I think I owe you $800. PayPal, I think I owe you $300. That's money, even if I had it, you're never getting it back. I'm stealing from you. I'm stealing from you. I'm stealing from you. I'm stealing from you. I am stealing from you.
It's interesting because these natives are not stingy and can be extremely generous when they want to be, as Jupiterian people, but have a tendency to begin to rebel against anything being demanded of them in that way. These men are also, of course, interesting in light of the deal with the devil trope, strong in this nakshatra of an individual taking out a loan for fame or wealth in exchange for their soul, but doing anything they can at the end of each tale in order to avoid actually having to pay that price. I mentioned Purva Bhadrapada natives often playing devils in that video, along with Ardra and Pusha of which I didn't explain at all. This is because of the way these nakshatras are inverse versions of one another. When you are essentially a sheep or craving to be taken care of, guided, etc., Pusha is godly to you, and Purva Bhadrapada that whispers of freedom from the bounds of religion is a tempting demon. When you're ready to cross the abyss and reach autonomy, the devil who whispers to you that you are a sheep and you must escape the pen, it becomes your savior. It shows you how you are fattening up to a point of critical mass with mercy, and that you need to pay back what you have accumulated into the fire and strip yourself to the core fruit of what all that accumulation was building and feeding. Again, showing that you have built a soul aligned with your own destiny and moral code. So it is only your spiritual state that makes you perceive Purva Bhadrapada or Pusha as God or the devil, whether the thing instructing you to follow rules or the thing instructing you to break them is appropriate for your stage. They both relate to offering impurity into fire, which is where devil imagery arises in the collective consciousness. Pusha is the austere priest who raises sheep and then is willing to give the fattest animal to sacrifice, while that fattened animal itself is a symbol for Purva Bhadrapada, something that has accumulated a lot and is ready to enter the fire and be reborn as a master instead of a sheep in a pen. This is why, for example, they are deprogrammers, and Crowley insisted on never being called a teacher but always a peer by those who learned from him, and in each person primarily working individually or with a partner and not creating cults or communes. Agni is said by many magicians in Southeast Asia to be identical to Shaitan or Iblis in Islam, the devil. This is because of his goat head and the offering of an entire goat into a fire as being a ritual to call forth Agni or Iblis. Agni is the wish granter, so when you want something and you go to a spiritual teacher who's ruled by Pusha, they will often recommend performing a fire offering to get your wish and desire granted. This is also why one of the primary nakshatras associated with Tripura Sundari, whose bija is Kleem, is Kritika, and Kleem is the Kama bija, the bija that grants your wishes and desires. Whatever you offer into the fire, you get back into your life, so if you offer ghee or sweets, your life and the people around you get sweeter. The secret of Agni is that the best offering, the offering that grants immortality, is offering yourself and your ego into the fire, which grants you a soul. So full spiritual powers come cosmically in Shravana, which is of the flipped planetary rulership of Pusha, and by the time they enter into the Purva Bhadrapada stage, a person must choose to give these spiritual powers in service to their will or lose control of them and sell their soul to Agni by losing control to their desires and impulses. The fire is the grantor of wishes, and just like the devil, a person who wants riches, fame, and power must make sacrifices to him, Agni. The adept offers their ego and reaps the purifying power of Kritika and the fire element, but the corrupt person will not make this sacrifice and thus is consumed by the fire. Either way, it is Agni who consumes the offering of the fire. He is the consumer of all fire offerings and takes them to the spirit world. This is why the wife of Agni is said to be Svaha, who is the mantra of the fire offering itself, as well as is said to be identical to Bhairavi, the goddess of Tejas. So again, additionally, there were other important factors that you can explore if you join my Patreon. Again, one particular Rashi was top for Sun, Moon, Venus, Rahu, and Saturn. One house was emphasized, as well as one common house placement for Mercury, Saturn, Venus, and Moon. Mercury in a certain nakshatra was really important. Consider joining my Patreon for extras and to support my ability to create these research videos. Leave your comments below on your thoughts on this research, how they may apply to Hasta, Purva Bhadrapada, or Pusha natives in your life. One of my favorite parts of the whole experience is reading your comments, so don't hold back on sharing your interesting experiences and connection that this video may have sparked for you with me below. Thank you so much to all my patrons. A special thank you to my Revati level patrons listed on the screen now, and a very special thank you for your generosity to my Abhijit level patrons, Ray, Ashley De La Cruz, Shashi, Tantric Tara, Eric Linden, Avnish Bangar, Maddie DRX, Teresa Green, Semia Hogan, Jewel, Michael M, Aiko, Crystal Perales, TTHP, Jordan Andaluz, Andre, Stephanie Cruz, Brianna Sanders, Anjali, Sasha Ravich, Karamsum Safehold, Gabrielle Schneider, John Welter, Jazz, and Nikki.